Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're honored to have Ms. Charlynn Johns with us today, the program director from the Veterans Resource Center in Dallas, Texas. Am I right?
You're right.
And a good friend, honestly, and a person that has created some programs that are very influential in the military life and in the professional football life. So, Charlynn, thanks for coming out and joining us today.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you. Well, now let's get started with first talking about your history. You know,
Okay.
How did you become involved in the military? Were there people in your family in the military? Tell us about that part.
My father was a Marine.
Okay.
He had retired long before I was born. My brother was a West Point graduate. He served in the Army. He just recently retired. He was a physician in the Army and had a very decorated career in the military. And most of the things that I got involved with the military is because I spent over 20 years overseas working with in a cross-cultural field with a faith-based organization, Sunshine After Rain. And when our returning military started coming back into San Antonio in 2008, one of the organizations that I worked with that worked with people that were impacted by trauma and disabilities started a program with the military in San Antonio and asked if I wanted to participate. So that began over 10 years ago in 2008, and my heart just broke for them. So after serving overseas, it's one thing to look in the third and fourth world. People don't have resources. People, there is no expectation on what they're going to have available. And I was astounded that our returning military families were faced with not just a lack of accessing resources, but really even knowing the next step. And really, I can just say that, our ministry, we were just kind of moved into that situation. I think I developed a level of trust and entrance into that military environment because they knew that I had seen how the rest of the world lives. Yeah. And that what they had experienced was not going to shock or, off-put me or my emotional standing. They knew that I had kind of had built up a resilience to what the world is really like.
You could handle it.
I could handle it.
What countries did you live?
I spent a lot of time in Russia,
Okay.
a lot of time in China, a lot of time in India, Africa, Sri Lanka after the tsunami, Bolivia, Israel. Spent a lot of time in Israel. So we worked primarily with orphans or people impacted by disability, war, or trauma. So it kind of fit. It kind of all fit together.
Yeah, all fit together.
Yeah. I still have people ask me, when are you going back to the jungle? And I'm like, hey, I'm in a jungle right now.
So you grew up where, in San Antonio?
No, I grew up here in Dallas.
Oh, in the Dallas
Yeah.
area. Okay.
Yeah.
I like the fact of the exposure. We talk a lot about, the value of, seeing other places and having a sensitivity to other places, and then to be able to bring that back with something.
Yeah.
So how did you start in the Veterans Resource area with
Well, I
one
had
of my good friends, Ken Watterson,
yes,
by the way.
absolutely. Well, I after I had been working with the military about 6 years, I was still traveling back and forth overseas. So from 2008 to 2014, our organization received a grant, unsolicited, that said, hey, we want you to do something with wounded veterans. And I had developed a lot of really good friendships in the San Antonio area with caregivers and military personnel. And I said, hey, I just got my checkbook. I can write a check for everybody, or we can build something for your community that can have a lasting impact. Well, you know what they would choose. So one of the caregivers had developed a list that she gave out to, everybody that came in through Operation Homefront, that she had developed on how to find, this resource, how to find that resource, how to find things. And I said, look, I'm a big Yelp person, and I'm a big, accessing resources. So let's just kind of like build a little directory. So as we did that, which is battlebuddyinfo.com. As we did that, we just really started accumulating and getting the word out to how to find resources. If you put in emergency financial aid for wounded veterans, you're going to get 16 million responses.
Yeah.
Well, if your husband or spouse is in the closet with a gun because they can't pay the electric bill, how are you going to navigate that? You can't. So the warriors and their caregivers designed the site. It's stripped down. There's no logos. There's no videos. I was like, but look at this pretty site. And they were like, no, we have traumatic brain injuries. We can't see that. So it's very simple. The way that we don't charge anybody to list anything. But what we require is there's a clear path for a person that's trying to access their service to access the service. So for instance, there's lots of hunting expeditions or golf tournaments or things that warriors can go to for free. But because nonprofits operate on trying to gather funds, they'll tell you, the website will say, here's 15 reasons why you should donate to send a warrior to a hunting trip. But if you're a warrior trying to find out how to get to go on that hunting trip, a lot of times that part was lacking. So we tried to educate the nonprofits and show, look, you need to have a parameter of who you're going to serve, how you're going to serve them, and how do they get on your list.
Yeah.
So that was one of our goals. We certainly have achieved that. But in the meantime, I got tasked with being the veteran coordinator for a huge event here in Dallas that takes place at Christmas. It's called Operation Care. And the last Saturday before Christmas, they serve homeless and underserved in the community. And part of that is veterans, homeless and underserved veterans in the community. They had heard about me through a common friend and said, hey, why don't you come and do this? So I went. They serve over 20,000 people at the convention center every year. And I gather community partners, and the first year we had one table at the end of a long row of 20 other community partners. For the last 3 years we've had 25,000 square feet with over 50 dedicated veteran community partners serving the veteran population that comes in. So we did partner with the VA for several years, so they were able to bring their goods and services there in an environment where I guess that was a little friendlier and more accessible to the population. But with that being said, I knew I didn't need to just know national resources. I needed to know what's here in Dallas, Texas for veterans, what's here in the DFW area. And one of the things was the Dallas Veteran Resource Center.
Okay.
So we went down there, and Ken Watterson kind of put us through the ringers because he knew a lot of people want to say, oh yes, I help veterans. Oh yes, I help homeless people. And you really have to have a strong constitution for it. And I'm still there after 5 years, so I think he's determined I have a strong constitution. I've told him many times, this is not my job, this is a calling, and you really have to have that kind of heart and that kind of commitment, because the level of burnout, it's not sustainable. It really isn't, even though
you're constantly emptying your bucket.
Human sympathy will get you so far, but it isn't sustainable.
Well, your life has been spent on helping others, though, hasn't it?
For the last 30 years, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's so you started helping people at 2. So
Yes, I have a 39-year-old daughter.
okay.
It's called The Lord Restores the Years the Locust and Bad Husbands and Decisions have made.
Well, let's talk about a program that we wanted to focus on, which
Absolutely.
was the Stop One program, and I think you have 3 taglines or tag words on saying engage, equip, and educate.
Right.
You want to talk a little bit about Stop One and how?
Absolutely. So, the number of suicides in the veteran population. I work in the veteran population, so everybody I talk to knows 20.6, 22 a day. That's kind of common. Yeah, that's kind of a common in our arena and our network of influence. However, I talk to people in the civilian world every day that have no idea what's going on in the veteran population. They have no idea what's going on with suicides in the youth population, which I'll say in Dallas County, between 2014 and 2016, the suicides rose 79%. So people aren't talking about it because mental illness still carries such a stigma, and such suicide has such shame attached to it that I'll talk to clinical professionals and they'll still whisper suicide under their breath, and I'm like, suicide? What is going on? Why is that? I know why it is, but the point is it's got to break through the cultural shame stigma in the way that AIDS did. Right. Nobody wanted to talk about HIV/AIDS. It was those people that were impacted by that, and they probably deserved that. That's why they're dying by that's why they're dying by AIDS. Yeah. And suicide has reached that same cultural shame factor, and yet it's impacting us at a far greater number than the HIV/AIDS. Yeah. We've worked on that. We've developed public health approaches to how that's handled, and educated the population. You can't get it by just touching or hugging someone. You can't. The same thing needs to start happening with suicide.
Information. Was there an age percentage to that 79% increase?
79 between 14 and 17. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there an age group? Is there a certain age that?
Well, it was, the age group was 14 to 17.
Oh, it was 14. Oh, okay. I thought those were the years. I see what you're saying. 14 to 17. Okay.
Yeah. So, again, have you heard that on the news? No. People aren't talking about that. And it's time that people start talking about it. I say, look, how many gym memberships are being shown? How many diet pills are being shown? How many cholesterol pills are being shown? How many of this is being shown? Yeah. That it's part of the daily conversation. Oh, we all know we need to get on a diet and exercise more. And here's all of the gym memberships that you can go to, but we're older, we're fatter, we're taking more medicine we're less healthy than we've ever been, and we're spending more money on commercials for the gym, and yet we're not spending that same amount of money on mental health.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're doing in terms of the Stop One program is talk a bit about that specifically.
So specifically, what happened is a female veteran in crisis called the Resource Center a year ago. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary, and she was in crisis. Ken said, the director, he realized, I do not know how to talk this person down. Right. We have a female veteran that works at the Resource Center. He put her on the line, hoping and praying that she would be able to mitigate the situation. She did. After that experience, he came to me and said, I had no idea what to say. If I am a Vietnam era veteran, Purple Heart recipient, founder of the Resource Center, in the veteran community all the time, if I don't know what to say, who knows what to say?
That's right.
So he had tasked me with the problem, and being a resource gatherer, I was like, look, the resources are there. We've just got to put them in a format where we can get it out to the public, where we can engage people and say, stop looking at your phone and start looking around to see who might need an extra encouragement, who might need you to say, man, that's a great hat. You might be down, you might be thinking, oh, all this bad stuff has happened, by just someone acknowledging you and engaging you as a human and saying, I see you. That can mean everything. So I developed the website. I found all these resources online I had no idea about. I had no idea. There's 1-minute videos. You can go and watch a 1-minute video that shows you, hey, here's something about suicide. You can read a 10-minute article that gives you the warning signs of mental illness. You can take a 20-minute course online, free of charge. So all those things, people don't start looking at suicide education and awareness until they've had a suicide impact them. So we're trying to get out in front of it and saying, hey, it's already impacting you. Be informed, be equipped, be engaged.
The impact of TBI and PTSD.
Absolutely.
And, those have an impact on suicide.
Absolutely. And probably in this, which certainly has impacted the NFL with CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So those things, they're physiological. People want to kind of shun the suicide talk because it's like, oh yeah, well, they were crazy. It's more than that. There is a physiological impact from being in the current conflict with the multiple traumatic brain concussions. Just as in the NFL, you're seeing the CTE, multiple impacts change the physiology of your brain. And what that does is, this is your prefrontal cortex, the governor of your impulses. So you can have an impulse like, I want to go gambling. Well, you can say, oh, it's too far. I'm not going to, that's a waste of time. Because you have that governor in check of your brain. You can control that impulse. Well, a person that has a damaged prefrontal cortex has a less amount of control. So when you get a thought like, my girlfriend just broke up with me, my wife left, my dog died, the country western song, you can't stop that impulsive next step to suicide.
Yeah. It was so interesting that you talked about the frontal lobe of the brain. In the NFL, the pre-1993 players were actually taught to hit face forward, face head up with that part of the brain. So that was just so interesting for me to hear that perspective. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about the brain itself, because they're telling us that the brain is 98% water, and it can be bruised early if you play football too early or if you're in the military.
Absolutely.
So the impact of the brain and how are there resources and support, for brain health?
Absolutely. There's a large research facility, the Center for Brain Health. They work hand in hand with an NFL. They also have a Warrior Wellness program. There is a lot of research that needs to be done. But it's just like telling a diabetic not to eat donuts. There is a physiological component to that needs to be understood, educated, and addressed. There's genetic factors of suicide. There's cultural factors of suicide. So people that have a suicide in their family or close friends, they're 40% more likely to die by suicide because it's seen as an option. So now one of my greatest concerns is we're raising a generation of military children that are 40% more likely to die by suicide. Now, by the time that child is 17, 18, 19 years old and dies by suicide, it won't even have the tie-in that this was related to this military parent, family, friend, because they're all being impacted. So we've got to address this now before it becomes the catastrophe that's on the way. So we really try to, in offering the wealth of classes free to the community, it's not free to us, we sponsor the classes, we really are trying to say, stop the stigma. If you are a person that is in a crisis, call the crisis line. And, if you are talking to somebody and you're worried about them, call the crisis line. If they're in imminent danger, call 911. People say, oh, no, they'll get mad at me for calling the police. They'll get mad. And I'm like, they'll be alive to be mad and glad in the same pair of breeches.
That's true.
So those kinds of points of engagement have to start happening, because otherwise you're going to be standing at a funeral saying, I knew something was wrong.
Well, and it's sort of like the ideation of Stop One. You've incorporated the families, right?
Yes.
Stop One is
everybody around the
Talk
veteran.
a little bit about that. If they see something.
It's the see something, say something.
That's right.
So our platform is veterans, because veterans make up 20% of the suicides. But we're not necessarily focusing on educating veterans. We're focusing on educating everyone around the veterans, neighbors, caregivers, spouses, clergy, everybody around that. Now, when you have the education, and not just education, but the level of comfort that you can say suicide without going suicide, then that's how that is going to be stopped. That's how people are going to start making that point of engagement. When people can say, are you thinking about suicide? Somebody that has gone through the traumatic, life event you have, they can start thinking about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? Now, people would say, oh, I can't say suicide because then they'll start thinking about suicide. Not happening.
Right.
When you say, are you thinking about suicide? You've let that person know you're not afraid to say suicide. And you're not afraid to engage in that level of conversation. You're going to give them that chance to say, wow, well, not today, but it has crossed my mind. And you're going to be able to direct them to help and say, hey, let's get you some help. What have you thought of? Let's get you some help. There's help out there. And many times it's free. People want to say, oh, I can't go to a psychiatrist. No, my family will think I'm crazy. No, your family will be glad you made a choice to be alive.
Is Stop One national?
Stop One, our resources on the site are national. We've had a lot of congressional support. So we are working to push it out and get the information out as fast and as hard as possible, because the information is out there. It's available. I mean, we're not looking for, recognition we're looking to save a life. If we can save one life, we've saved the world entire.
And there is a Stop One app, right?
We like to promote the Not Okay app, because it was developed by a 16-year-old on behalf of his sister who had made an attempt. And you can download the app. You put in 5 people that you trust, and it sends them. It has on there, "I'm not okay." I'm not okay. It sends a text to your 5 trusted people that have confirmed they will be your trusted people. Right. And most importantly, it sends your GPS location. Now, what you might think, oh, that's, easy and simple. But what that does for the person that's in a crisis is I don't have to think, who can I call? Could I call Larry? Oh man, it's 6 o'clock. He's probably still on the golf course. Oh, I could call Ken, but no, Ken said he was going out of town. All you have to do is hit, I'm not okay. And then that gets blasted. It's free. One of those people responds. It sends the text to everybody else. Larry's responded to Charlynn. You come, you assist me, you call, whatever, find out what's going on. I mean, it can also work for the elderly, and I've fallen and I can't get up.
Yeah.
Where you're not thinking, who's going to care?
You've done such a great job with this. This should be a global program, not necessarily a national program.
Absolutely, because the information is there.
Yeah.
It's accessible. It's ready to be accessible. People don't know. People don't want to have that conversation. Again, we've seen cultural shifts in how people looked at the LGBTQ community, at how people looked at HIV/AIDS, because stories were told.
Yeah.
Human stories were told that engaged the public and said, that was my uncle. Oh, that was my daughter. That was my neighbor. I could have done something.
Yeah.
I could have gotten help.
Are there any events coming up?
We have we have regularly scheduled trainings.
Mm-hmm.
So we train in, I do Talk Saves Lives, which is a broad stroke on suicide education and prevention. The curriculum is American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We do CALM, which is Counseling on Access to Lethal Means. Now, why that's important in the military community is because 79% of the time they're choosing the 98% lethal means. They're dying by firearm.
Right.
So counseling on how to have a conversation to get that lethal means away from them is critical. We teach on moral injury, and you might say, what is moral injury? And that's really important, especially for this generation of warriors, in that the conflict is different. We don't have a defined enemy that we're walking into. They're urban areas. They're kind of policing those areas, and they're using human shields as explosive devices. So when that happens to a warrior that they've had to take out some child that they've had a relationship with, it changes you in a way that is not, that is so profoundly wounding. It's beyond post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
It's a wounding of your moral code that is built into you from, your earliest foundations.
Yeah.
So we have a training on that. We offer mental health first aid, which is the CPR of mental health crisis. Look, CPR became a public health initiative. Do you know CPR?
No, I don't.
Well, lots of people know CPR,
Okay.
but very few people wind up using it, because you're not, the chance that you're going to run into somebody that has a cardiac event is very low.
Okay, that's CPR. Yes,
Yeah.
I know. Okay.
Yeah, CPR. Yeah, that's very low.
Okay.
Have you ever had to use that?
I've not had to
No,
use it,
but you know how to do it.
Yeah.
But because the impetus on public health, getting people out, they knew that would save somebody.
Okay.
But you're more likely to encounter someone in a mental health crisis than you ever are in a cardiac crisis. And if you know how to engage and have the conversation and guide them into appropriate help, you can save their life. So those are just a few of our offerings.
Well, the Veterans Resource Center is located where?
It's located 4900 South Lancaster, 4 blocks south of the Dallas VA, second largest VA in the nation.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Well, and we have one of the most caring people working there called
Absolutely.
Charlynn Johns.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
We really appreciate you coming and
Absolutely.
speaking about this today, and any efforts that we can have in support of getting this information out.
Thank you.
Not
We
just
appreciate it.
regionally, but nationally or internationally.
Absolutely.
We're there for you.
Thank
You've done
you.
a wonderful job in helping
Thank
veterans
you.
and helping former professional athletes.
Thank you. I appreciate
Are
it.
you
Thank you for
listening?
coming on today.
Absolutely.
Damn.